Greetings, this is the Questing GM. So I'm back with another prep quest video for Audio Abyss. Now we are moving on to chapter 12, which is the Tower of Vengeance. And based on the last video of Audio Abyss, the PCs basically went to Gravenhollow, and they've managed but the book intends for the PCs to do all your research, ask the right questions, whether with the librarians who are there, the Stone Giant librarians, or going through the records and the archives of the past, present, and future. But they will most likely gain the most amount of information through using the Stone Speaker Crystal, whether they got it from Greco-Stuck or from the librarians in Gravenhollow, and see the visions that was available to them in different parts of in different timelines, past, present, and future. And maybe find out more about what actually caused the demon lords to appear in the Underdark, and what are the consequences, or what has or how each of the demon lords have sort of spread their influence within the Underdark, depending where the demon lord landed in Gravenhollow. And one of the major events that happened in Gravenhollow is the meeting with Vizeran DeVir, a exiled archmage from Menzoberranzan, allegedly as powerful as Gromf Bainray himself, who is Archmage of Menzoberranzan, and Vizeran is going to be offering the PCs a sort of as a proposition that he may be able to help deal with the whole Demon Lord situation, but he's not going to share the details of his plan right inside Gravenhollow, because if you remember in the previous video we mentioned that whatever happens within Gravenhollow actually gets recorded as an echo. And that means that anyone who actually visits Gravenhollow later on, they may be able to see that echo of the incident, and that probably will not be a good idea. And Vizeran is aware of this, and he doesn't want his details to be revealed within or recorded within Gravenhollow in itself. So what he actually proposes to the PCs is that the PCs will actually have to come over to his tower, which is called the Tower of Vengeance. And I think I didn't mention this in the previous video, but he actually gives the PCs a map to get to the Tower of Vengeance, and it's entirely up to the PCs to decide whether they will want to go, they will rather follow Vizeran to the Tower of Vengeance immediately, or maybe they will take the map and then go to the Tower of Vengeance at a much later date, if there's any pending task the PCs want to deal with before going to meet with Vizeran. So in my case, when I was running it, my players actually decided to go back to Gontogrim because they had to report back to King Brueno and answer some questions that King Brueno asked them to find out in Gravenhollow. And so the PCs, and also the PCs wanted to consult with the King Brueno and the other factions that should they work with Vizeran DeVir and some of the implications that comes with it. But in any case, whatever if the decision of the PCs, is to follow or to find Vizeran, then that's where chapter 12 comes in, which is what happens when the PCs actually try to get to the Tower of Vengeance. So as usual, we'll start off with a summary of the chapter, which starts on page 160 and it goes up to page 165. Yeah, so it's another very, very short chapter, just a few pages, and there's actually not a lot that's going to be happening in the chapter in itself, but there is somewhat good amount of details about the Tower of Vengeance itself. But it's quite easy to say that basically it's about the PCs just going to the tower, meet with Vizeran, talk about the plan, and then decide whether or not they will want to join forces with Vizeran. The chapter starts with introduction about how to tie chapter 12 with the events in chapter 11, which is in Gravenhollow. But the first section would be about talks about how to get to the tower itself. So the summary notes here is that basically the tower lies around within the Worm Wreathings region of Underdark, which is one region that the PCs will definitely have to be exploring much later on in the later chapters. If the PCs are traveling from Gontogrim to the Tower of Vengeance, they would have to pass through the Worm Wreathings. So that means that you could actually sort of go in advance to study up on the Worm Wreathings encounter to see what sort of random encounters that can happen within the Worm Wreathings, which is actually quite different from what is the random encounter tables available for the general Underdark. According to the map, and the map will provide the proper directions without the PCs getting lost. So that actually solves the navigation troubles or worries about finding the Tower of Vengeance. And the book also does tell you to use the worm eating surrender encounter tables, which is on chapter 13. Upon nearing your destination, there's actually a sort of a narrow passage that is concealed by a magically protected secret door, and the way to open it is actually to use the map. The map will sort of just highlight where the outline of the door is, and then by touching the map to the door, it would then open. And the PCs will have to go into the side tunnel for about 100 feet away, and then they will come to a large cavern where the Tower of Vengeance can be seen. If the PCs are actually going to be traveling with the entire complement of the expeditionary force, not all of them would be able to fit in. So some of them will have to be sort of maybe waiting or camped outside the side tunnel. And if they are brought in, they are brought in through this. If they decided to, if a small detachment of the expeditionary force decide to join the PCs to enter the Vizeran Tower, they can reach the tower, but Vizeran will only allow the PCs to enter the tower itself. So whoever's left will have to be waited outside the tower itself. The next section, that's on page 160. There's a very short section on reaching the tower, and then from page 161, we basically get into talking about the tower in the tower proper, Vizeran's tower, or the Araj, or also the Tower of Vengeance. So these are three interchangeable names that I'll probably be dropping off once in a while, just to make things a little clear. So the tower is generally divided into 6 sections, 6 levels. Going from bottom up, and for the first level is basically an antechamber with an audience hall. Second level is it has kitchens, storage, and some unused servants' quarters. Level 3 is where the guest bed chambers are, and a torture chamber as well for certain guests. Level 4 is where Vizeran's library and laboratory is. Level 5 is where the Archmage private chambers live, and then level 6 is Vizeran's private sanctum, which is where he spends most of his time doing contemplation and study and research for all this sort of thing. Okay. One sort of secret that is in Vizeran's sanctum is that he actually keeps a teleportation circle there, and only he knows the circle sequence to come to this circle if he needs to. But bear in mind, this is something that he doesn't really use often or risk doing, because of the whole nature of phase rays in the Underdark that can be dangerous when you're trying to teleport. Or use teleportation magic within the Underdark itself. But in any case, this is sort of like a emergency exit and a emergency entry back to his own tower, just in case he's out there and having troubles with it, having some problems that might get him killed. Besides reading the actual, reading what is actually contained within the tower in itself, I would definitely be highly recommending you will find, I would say, most of the information within page 162 as well, which has a sidebar on the general features. So basically the tower is always dark, mostly dark, because no one besides Vizeran needs any light to see anything. There are some spells that are in place as guards and wards in the tower in itself that protects Vizeran from intruders, and that's something we will talk a little bit at the end of the chapter. And there is a levitation shaft that helps PCs not have to walk up the stairs and basically just travel between helps Vizeran and the PC to travel between the levels as they need to. But obviously they will need to have say the proper command words that the sidebar area does provide to the PCs. Now, moving on to the next section is the meeting with Vizeran, and what is Vizeran going to do, or what is Vizeran going to say. But before that, they sort of give a brief background of each of the notable NPCs that will be found in Vizeran's tower. So obviously the first one will be Vizeran himself, and his motives are vengeance against a ground Bainray, the Archmage of Menzenbranson. Some of the more hidden information about him is that he's not actually he obviously doesn't worship Loth, so he's actually a follower of the Elder Elemental Eye, which I believe is something that's tied with the Princess of Apocalypse module or at least that's one of the main baddies that runs the Princess of the Apocalypse module. So his motives are to actually overthrow Gromf, show up Gromf, and also to sort of discredit the matriarchy in Menzelbransen, and also maybe sort of break the chain of power or chain of command of the priestesses who rules over Menzelbransen. Though there is one interesting tidbit that is also included in the Vizeran's description, is that he talks about that he is actually, he despite him knowing that the presence of the demon are actually causing madness to spread around all over the Underdark, and he believes he has taken precautions to protect himself from the demonic madness, he actually is not as protected as he thinks he is. And that's actually something that I exploited to sort of make things a little bit more interesting in my running of Out of the Abyss, which I'll talk about it much later, maybe the end of the video. Okay, the next important NPC would be Clef, who is actually a death slut in disguise. He would probably appear as either a servant, but in my case, I made him sort of like a partner to a female partner to Vizeran. But in any case, he's just basically a polymorphed death slut, and which is who is controlled entirely by Vizeran, because Vizeran has a control gem that he wears that he always carries with him on person, and therefore Clef just effectively works as a bodyguard to Vizeran and will protect Vizeran, whether commanded or not. Obviously, there is probably some possibility that the PCs may be able to gain control of Clef if they are able to gain control of that control gem, or maybe even used Clef against Vizeran. Now, the one other NPC that is not mentioned, or that was not previously mentioned in Gravenhollow, is actually Green Ostil, I believe, for half of House Ostil. So Green is basically a drow apprentice, a male drow apprentice to Vizeran, who is also an exile from Menzelbransen, and he's pretty much like a young upstart, and the background says that he basically caused a little bit of trouble that would have got him executed back in Menzelbransen, but he managed to escape, and he is also part of a secret organization within Menzelbransen called the Council of Spiders, and once he was picked up by Vizeran and became his apprentice, he sort of used the influence of Vizeran to sort of make Vizeran sort of like a patron to the Council of Spiders. And the Council of Spiders is basically a secret council of wizards in Menzelbransen, or male wizards in Menzelbransen, who are also trying to wrestle some control and some power from the priestesses of Loth. So he, as much as he's interested in gaining control or gaining power in Menzelbransen, he is not as extreme as Vizeran's ideals. While Vizeran is actually more towards sort of destroying Menzelbransen almost to its very foundations, so that he can rebuild it and reshape it in his image. Green is still a bit more attached to having Menzelbransen as it is. It's just that changing the seats of power and whoever is calling the shots. So it'll become very prevalent that there is this what Vizeran wants to do to Menzelbransen, and and how the PCs play a part in this role. But Green definitely has a different idea to this whole thing, and that may be the interesting conflict that would come in at much later in the adventure, when the PCs are finally ready to call out the showdown with all the demon lords. But we'll talk a little bit about that in this video, in this chapter, and we'll definitely be talking about that way towards the end of the adventure itself, when everything comes onto a climax. All right. Some other inhabitants that was noted within the book in itself. There's nothing really much besides the three that I've already mentioned: Clef, Vizeran, and Green. There are some permanent unseen servants, who does all the cleaning and all the daily chores of maintaining the tower. But the book also notes that there's a whole, there are like about 24 animated suits of armor that are kept, in every rooms, in every passageways, and they're basically just constructed guards, just around the tower in itself. So and obviously if they come to any situation where Vizeran is attacked, then obviously there's suits of armor which are basically using the animated armor stat in the monster manual. They'll pretty much be the rank and file that becomes Vizeran soldiers to deal with any intruders. All right. Now, moving on into Vizeran's scheme. The book sort of gives like differentiates between what he knows, what he wants, and what he has to offer to the PCs. So, what he knows is basically it's something that the PCs will have to gain through back and forth. The book even sort of suggests that they may be involving some sort of wisdom insight check, DC 20, to sort of make Vizeran open up certain information that he may not be privy of or may not be willing to share, or he may be omitting certain details that the PCs may be interested in, but that Vizeran thinks that it wouldn't really help them as much or deter them from his agenda. But basically what Vizeran knows is that he knows who is behind the whole summoning of the Demonauts, which he's concluded is actually Loth, but it was actually through Gromf Bainray's ritual summoning that caused that summoned not only Demogorgon into Menzoberranzan, but also the other Demonauts by accident. But at least this is some kind of manipulation on the part of Loth. The next thing is that he also knows that there are several Demonauts spread across all the Underdark. So I guess the only ones that the PCs will not have met in the first half of the adventure technically may have been Graz, depending where you want to place him. Orcus also, who is not mentioned in the entirety of the adventure. So whether Orcus does play a role within your running of all the Abyss is entirely up to you. But Vizeran is aware that Orcus has also been brought into the Underdark and basically the material plane. Baphomet is also another Demonaut that the PCs may not have met, but may have saw in a vision in Gravenhollow. Same goes with Inogu. So these are probably the only 4 Demonauts that the PCs will not have encountered prior to Gravenhollow and the Tower of Vengeance. The obvious ones that they have met were Demogorgon twice, depending where they went. More in Neverlight Grove, and then Druidblacks would be in Lindenstone. So Vizeran will basically, if the PC don't already know, then Vizeran will tell them that these are not the only Demonauts that are available that are currently in the Underdark. There are also the other Demonauts as well, like Baphomet, Inogu, and maybe even Graz. All right, but having said that, what Vizeran knows that Gromf is the one who has cast the ritual, and therefore he thinks that is sort of the fulcrum or the focus point of bringing the Demon Lords in, and therefore that could be the possible way for bringing Demon Lords out. Further down the line, basically Vizeran just sort of gives his version of events of what happened after Gromf's summoning of Demon Lords fails, in this case. Demogorgon appears in Menzoberranzan, causes havoc, destroys quite a big portion of quite a few portions of the city, and then basically Gromf runs off into the Underdark, and that's why the PCs will be able to meet Demogorgon, later on in Slubudub. One other thing that Vizeran knows, that's something that the Drow themselves may not know, is that Gromf sort of went into hiding after the summoning, after witnessing what the summoning did to Menzoberranzan, and probably for very good reasons, because if anyone knew that he was responsible for summoning Demogorgon within Menzoberranzan, the priestesses the houses would probably not be very happy about it. The Drow themselves are trying to keep that Demogorgon appeared within Menzoberranzan a secret among the other races from Gracklstad, from Lincolnstone. The Drow are sort of trying to wash their hands from this whole incident, and not trying to be the one blamed for it, but at least the real culprit, or the person who actually did the summoning, is no longer in Menzoberranzan anymore. What Vizeran wants is basically that he wants to use the Demon Lords to sort of push his agenda, which is pretty much to destroy Menzoberranzan, or at least remove the priesthood of Loth, or the matriarchy of Loth within the city's government. And he will swoop in to be its savior and gain control of the city and as I said reshape Menzoberranzan in his image as ruler of Menzoberranzan. Sweeten the deal to sort of before the PCs make a decision on whether they will be joining in with Vizeran. Vizeran obviously has some offers for the PCs to say that okay, if you join with me, this is what you're gonna benefit from. So the book just outlines a few items, magic items that the PCs will be getting if they do agree with Vizeran. Number one is a Drow Piwafi. So it's basically a Drow's version of Cloak of Elvenkind. It definitely helps with the stealth, and I think it helps with a certain darkness elements or something like that. So that's something that everyone gets for free from Vizeran if they decide to help him with that. Then he also provides them with an amulet that is basically there's effectively a scroll or protection from fiends. Just in case that's a good one-off item to use against with the PCs as long as the PCs will be dealing a lot with demons later on in the adventure. And also he offers the Tower of Vengeance as a base of operations for the PCs and also for the Expeditionary Force if you're using the Expeditionary Force. And his last offer is obviously that he has a plan to get rid of the Demon Lords within the Underdark in itself. And that is actually where we'll get into the juiciest part of the entire encounter with Vizeran and the Tower of Vengeance. Basically, he's claiming that he can sort of reverse engineer Grom's ritual that summoned the Demon Lord, but instead of summoning the Demon Lords, into the material plane, he can sort of bring them all together in a location using a certain talisman. Vizeran would tell the PCs that this talisman only works within Menzoberranzan, and you could sort of make up the fact that because Menzoberranzan itself is pretty much covered in phase rays, or pretty much protected in phase rays. So the talisman requires the phase rays energy within Menzoberranzan to work. And this is where the PCs come in the sense that to make this talisman, which he called the Dark Heart, or named the Dark Heart, he requires several components that the PCs will have to collect throughout the Underdark so that he'd be able to create the Dark Heart. So there are altogether 7 components that's stated out in the book. The first is obvious. The first is an unhatched and intact and unhatched purple worm egg. And the book actually sort of gives a small description about what each component is for, or what component do they play within the talisman itself. So the first one is a purple worm egg. Second is a central eye of a beholder. The third is 6 feathers from 6 different angels. The fourth is the heart of a Goristro demon, one of the more top tier demons. The fifth is 3 Timask mushrooms, or basically called the devil's mushrooms, which is, if you may remember, this is something that the PCs will encounter within Gracklestone in the Wolfstone tunnels. But they can also be found in the wilderness of the Underdark, although they are most often more rare than the other Underdark fungi. This can't be just any Timask mushrooms or devil's mushrooms that the PCs will have to find. It has to sprout from a footprint of a Merilith, or Baelor, or Goristro. So there's some extra conditions being set to this one, but the book sort of has that plan out ahead of where the PCs will be able to find a mushroom that fits those particular conditions. But because the conditions says it's a Merilith, a Baelor, or Goristro, it doesn't really stop you from saying that giving a PCs a random encounter that deals with either one of these demons, and they so happens to be Timask mushrooms growing around them or within their footprints. So that can be sort of slotted out as a random encounter if you decide to do so. The 6th component is a few drops of blood or ichor from a demon lord. So that definitely means that the PCs will have to at some point meet up with a demon lord, whether confronting them directly or not, but at some point be able to hurt the demon lord or find a wounded demon lord and gather that particular component and the specific reason why they mention blood or ichor is because it is also applies to duplex, and the PCs can definitely, if the PCs happen to bump into duplex, then yeah, sure, they can definitely get that. And the final component, the seventh component, is Gromp Benria's Grimoires, and basically Vizeran needs the notes from Gromp of when he did summoning ritual and try to sort of reverse engineer or try to make a new version of the ritual to complete the ritual that's been going to be cast with on the talisman or the dark heart to work. All right, so the book pretty much lays out where each of these components can be found. So the purple worm and the eye of the beholder will be found in the worm greetings, which is in chapter 13. The angel feathers and the heart of the grey scroll can be found in the labyrinth, which is in chapter 14. And then the grimoire of Gromp Benria can be found in Menzoberranzan in chapter 15. So I believe also the Timas mushroom and the blood or ichor of the demon lord, you can sort of get them through random encounters, but I believe you can also get them in chapter 14 when the PCs go into the labyrinth, because there will be a few encounters with some demon lords, and then there is a few opportunities for the PCs to actually gather the ichor and also the mushrooms. So yeah, that pretty much covers all the places where the book expects you to get all the 7 components. As a GM, you don't have to really worry too much about where exactly are these components being found. Now, so that's really the main plan. That's where the PCs come in. They just need to help Vizeran find all the 7 components to build his talisman, the Dark Heart, and also steal Gromp Benria's grimoires, most likely in Menzoberranzan, and bring them all in. And then when Vizeran is able to make the talisman and has everything done, then things are pretty much ready to go, and that's where it will lead you on to the final chapters of the adventure. Now, the book, however, does has a small section dedicated on what happens if the PCs do not agree with or do not want to work with Vizeran, despite his proposal. So my advice for this is, yes, definitely consider what happens if the PCs do not want to work with Vizeran. And the idea here, I think, is probably that Vizeran's way is pretty much a shortcut. Because if the PCs were to have to deal with each demon lord one by one, demonic influence could spread even further, and with the right amount of time. So that sort of pretty much endangers not only the Underdark, but eventually even the surface if all the threats, all the demon lords are not dealt with in the proper time frame. So there's a sense of urgency that you probably want to give to the relay to the PCs that if you don't want to work with Vizeran, then you're probably going to have to think of a way to stop the influence from spreading too fast, too soon. And it's not to discourage the PCs for lack of trying. In fact, probably that's maybe a more interesting route to go with for the rest of the campaign. Although the book wouldn't be really able to cover or provide much help in that regard, except maybe if the PCs go to the specific location where the demon lords are and then deal directly with them. But yes, try to make some preparations and try to have some ideas about what would you do as a DM if the PCs decide to say no, we don't want to work with Vizeran. Vizeran hasn't been actually telling the PCs the entire truth about the talisman, as in the sense that the talisman, the Dark Heart itself, doesn't actually have to work within Menzoberranzan, although that's probably the impression that the Vizeran is going to give to the PCs, that it has to be put in Menzoberranzan only because it serves Vizeran's interest to destroy Menzoberranzan. But the truth of the matter is, it can be pretty much placed anywhere. That is actually stated that the talisman and the ritual in itself has to be performed in a place that has the phase race. Maybe one other thing that might have been easily overlooked is that Vizeran doesn't actually have to be in the same place where the Dark Heart or the talisman is actually placed. So if there's some sort of communication between the PCs and Vizeran, the PCs can actually place the Dark Heart somewhere else that Vizeran wasn't expecting, and then just communicate to Vizeran that it's already in place in Menzoberranzan, and then Vizeran will be able to perform the ritual that will summon all the demon lords to that location, assuming that it's going to be at Menzoberranzan. So this is actually the sort of loophole within Vizeran's plan, and that is actually where Green comes in to sort of be that little wrench in the gears, that he may at some point reveal to the PCs that actually the talisman doesn't have to be in Menzoberranzan, it can be somewhere else, and Green may be more motivated to sort of push the PCs in the direction that, don't put it in Menzoberranzan, but I guess ultimately at the end of the day, it's really up to the PCs to decide where they want to put the talisman, and try to fool Vizeran from performing the ritual when it's not at Menzoberranzan. The last section is basically stealing into the Araj, which is basically another alternative or optional route of if the PCs even decide not to follow Vizeran back to the Tower of Vengeance, or when they follow the map to Vizeran's Tower of Vengeance and decide not to announce their arrival to Vizeran, and this can happen in few different ways. Although this section of the book on stealing into Araj is basically talking about the security measures that Vizeran has in place within the tower in itself. And it's actually quite numerous, because it starts off with the secret door that leads to the side tunnel that leads towards the Tower of Vengeance, is protected by an alarm spell. So unless the PCs are aware that there is a powerful alarm spell that's placed on the door, and maybe find some way to disarm it, then if just by going through that secret door in itself will already alert Vizeran that the PCs have already passed through the door, and he may prepare his defenses against intruders if the PCs are not coming with any good. If he finds out that the PCs are actually not coming with good intentions or friendly intentions at least. Then there's the placement of a guards and wards spell that's across the entire tower, and therefore the towers will be all arcane locked if Vizeran is not welcoming them. And if the PCs do somehow still manage to break into the tower, there would still be a whole plethora of web spells that is placed around different areas of the tower to sort of entrap PCs, walking up the stairways, or even use the levitation shaft. The book also gives sort of some stats for the doors that's in the tower itself. So if the PCs decide if they can't remove the arcane lock spell or lockpick the door, they can still destroy it with brute force, but they will have to deal with the stats of the doors themselves. Then there's a couple of magic mouths that sort of warns intruders away from the tower itself, and also the private sanctum of Vizeran. So there are two different phrases that each of the magic mouths say that may give some indication to the PCs that they may be entering into certain areas of Vizeran's tower that might be of interest to them, or maybe to stay away from. So in terms of the NPC defenses that the tower has, as we've already mentioned before, is the animated armor constructs that are available. If you want to be a little bit more cheeky, you could probably switch a few of them into be iron golems, which is going to be a much more dangerous foe and much more better protector for a wizard or archmage of caliber as Vizeran. And then there's Death Slut, the Clef himself, who's a Death Slut, who may try to ambush the PCs with an invisibility spell. And they also even provide some battle tactics that Vizeran would use if he's been put into a combat situation. The most important of which, if he thinks he's not going to be able to survive, or has to escape, he will actually cast a time stop spell, which is available to a archmage stat block. If you read the archmage stat block, he is able to cast time stop, and he would use that amount of time that is given to run off, either through a teleport spell, or he will use his teleportation circle to escape if the PCs don't find out where he is. And if the PCs do manage to for whatever reason, maybe during the breakdown of negotiations, or actually just attacking Vizeran at whatever point of the adventure, then the PCs will be able to loot his tower, and the book just points you towards the DMG to generate the treasures there, in addition to the magic items that were being offered to the PCs in the first place, which is the Piwafi and the amulets. So that's generally the summary. That's the compact of 5 pages into the book. Like I said, it's not a very long chapter by page count, but there is actually pretty much a lot of information that's packed into who is Vizeran, what his motives are, and what are his resources that's available to the PCs if the PCs so decide to work with Vizeran. But I guess despite covering some possible areas that the PCs may not be following the book, the intention of the chapter is pretty much straightforward, and I don't see any reason why you shouldn't really follow it as it states, because like I said, this is actually one of the more pivotal events or chapter within the adventure itself, because this is actually the so-called light at the end of the tunnel of what the PCs can actually do to actually end the entire situation within the Underdark. And whether the PCs like it or not, working with Vizeran is probably the most effective way to get rid of demon lords. But do try to encourage some sort of moral dilemma of working with Vizeran, and maybe even knowing the fact of that Vizeran is actually trying to exploit the situation more than solving the situation in his favor more than the PC's favor. But as I said, and I think that's actually pretty much the first advice that I would give about running this chapter, is that make the PCs realize they are working with between two evils. Make it a bit unsure to the PCs or murky to the PCs that if they do follow Vizeran's way, are they actually working for the lesser evil or actually even a worse one? And the second advice I would say, because given the fact that there is this exploitable loophole in Vizeran's plan that the PCs can play a part to make it fail, give the PCs a chance to have a very meaningful interaction with Green. Make him a memorable NPC that the PCs met in the Tower of Vengeance. Maybe as Green is guiding the PCs towards through the tower to meet with Vizeran in his library or in his private chambers, not the sanctum. Don't reveal. It's probably advisable not to reveal that Vizeran has a private sanctum hidden on the top floor of the tower and his escape hatch. So as Green leads him to the private chamber, which is below that sanctum, then that's probably where they can have some good back and forth, talking about maybe Green's past and maybe his sort of homesickness for Mezzobranzen, or maybe he wishes he could go back to where he comes from, but maybe in a different circumstance. You could sort of make Green an important NPC as a point of contact with the PCs. Like if the PCs need anything, they will have to talk to Green first before the offer or the ask for help is made to Vizeran and Vizeran replies. And obviously the last, and I think the one that is most easily overlooked, is don't hang on to the idea that the PCs will work with Vizeran. Make it a very tempting offer, but don't make it the only offer. Definitely think quite ahead in advance. What are the other ways the PCs can have to deal with the demon lords? So in my case, I think it was pretty much obvious that the PCs will have to find each demon lord, knowing how many demon lords there are currently in the Underdark, and the easiest way would be to defeat them, because if any demon is defeated in the material plane, their essence actually sent back to the abyss. So that's actually pretty much the most straightforward and the no-brainer way of dealing with the demon lords. Actually defeat them in the Underdark, and then their essence will immediately send back to the abyss. Downside of doing this method is the ticking clock of how fast can the PCs actually get rid of the demon lords as soon as before the entire influence spread. And one way you could sort of do this is sort of envision what a different version of the Underdark would look like if the demon lord sort of rules over it. Like Zookmoi will probably spread her spores all over the Underdark. Yenogu will probably bring his entire Nor race down into the Underdark and taking control of it and slaughtering any of the Underdark races. Baphomet may be building an entire labyrinth, or try to lure or try to warp reality of the Underdark into a gigantic labyrinth that no one is able to come out from, or something like that. Demogorgon would probably just waylay to everything once he's done destroying everything in the Underdark. He will probably just move up to the surface. Jublex will pretty much be the same thing with Demogorgon. Is that he's instead of destroying it with fungus like Zookmoi, he'll be just spreading slime or oozes all over the place, and just swallowing up everything up. And for Jublex and Zookmoi, they would definitely have a very special role. or special encounter that would be happening in the much later chapters. Several occasions where the PCs would be able to get in contact with the Demon Lords and get the Blood Acre part, in different areas. So don't have to be worried about that. Now, the only big twist that I actually did in my running of Out the Abyss when the PCs were meeting with Vizeran is that, and I've mentioned this probably in many videos in second half, is that I did not play out Mental Deriv as it is, and I did not put Fraz Blue as the demonic influence that is influencing the Demon Lord, and I did not place his Black Gem in Mental Deriv. The trick, my trick was I actually placed the Black Gem and Fraz Blue's gem and Fraz Blue's influence in Vizeran's tower. So if you remember, I mentioned that there is this small tidbit that says that Vizeran isn't as protected as he thought he was by the demonic influence. Is that he actually thought that the Black Gem of Power is some sort of magical item that's giving him powers, and maybe even giving him delusions of that he can actually destroy all the Demon Lords. So yes, I instead of making him a worshipper of the Elder Elemental Eye, which I figured wouldn't really doesn't have a real significant role to play with my players who hasn't played Princess of the Apocalypse, I figured why not make him a servant of Fraz Blue. Unknowingly, of course, he's gone mad to that aspect that he believes himself to be the savior, the underdog, and Menzo Branson, and that's probably the lies that Fraz Blue is feeding him. But his methods are probably not the most. It's not as crazy as it sounds. And one reason why I did this is that because by removing all the Demon Lords, and obviously the ritual is not meant to, is probably altered and not meant to call in Fraz himself. But by removing all the Demon Lords from the Underdark and leaving Fraz as the only standing Demon Lord left in the Underdark, then Fraz is much more capable of spreading his influence within the Underdark, without the scrutiny and the blockade and the restrictions that's being provided by the other Demon Lords. So it's actually something like a big another layer of meta plot of Vizeran's of working with Vizeran. That this is the unseen consequences if the PC actually do work with Vizeran and allow and actually chase away all the Demon Lords using Vizeran's method. So yeah, so that was my twist that I put when the PCs were dealing with Vizeran, and also using that as a excuse that he's a servant of Fraz Blue. I actually added another component to the list of components, and which because if you read Fraz Blue's entry and his description, he actually yearns for a Staff of Power. So yeah, so that's why I implanted the idea that the PC is actually traveling to Mental Deriv after they've met with Vizeran and accepted the deal, and where the Staff of Power is included in the list of components, that they actually had to go to Mental Deriv to actually trade for that Staff of Power, and using the barter trading system that I mentioned in that video. So yeah, so that's my big twist, and to a certain extent, it actually sort of worked pretty well. The PCs didn't realize, the PCs, although grudgingly, had to accept Vizeran's terms. But yeah, like I said, they were not realizing that they were actually working for a much darker evil, even though they thought that they actually got the better end of the deal of getting rid of all the Demon Lords. So that's something that I guess you could help you end Out the Abyss adventure on a more serious tone. That victory isn't as sweet as it tasted after all has been said and done. So yeah, so I think that's pretty much it that I have to say for chapter 12, Tower of Vengeance, and the meeting with Vizeran. And so these like I said, besides the summary that I've provided, these are basically all my ideas, all my recommendations. Take them for what they are worth to you. Things will only get more interesting from here on, if the PCs do decide to accept Vizeran's deal, which is the assumption that will be going on in the later chapters of the adventure. So I guess that'll be all for tonight, and this will be the Questing GM signing out for now, and I'll see you in the next prep quest video where we will go into chapter 13, The Worm Rethinks. So this is Questing GM signing out for now, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.